Hi everyone, Ed here from FYA. I'm really excited to be interviewing Anita Schjøll Brede, CEO and co-founder of Iris AI, an artificial intelligence that reads all of the world's scientific research and connects the dots to help us turbocharge our research capabilities. Anita has also delivered 2 TED Talks and was named one of the most inspiring women in tech by Inspiring 50. Anita is also going to be in Australia speaking at the Singularity Summit in Sydney from the 19th to the 21st of February. Check out the link in the description for more info. So, joining us from Norway, welcome Anita. Anita, how are you going?
Hi, good to be here.
So Anita, could you tell us a little bit about Iris? What is it? What does it do?
Yeah, so ultimately our big vision, our big plan is to build what we call an AI researcher or an AI system that can read all of the research in the world, extract the hypothesis from each paper, look at those hypotheses all in connection, validate the truth of each part of the hypothesis, and then build new knowledge on top of that and help us do research. And that's kind of a 10-year undertaking. So what we're doing today is the first few steps of the research process, which is in some fields called a systematic research landscape mapping, which is a really long name, or you could call it, the first part of the literature review, where you basically say, here's my problem. What exact literature should I read to understand state of the art, or to build a new product, or to solve a problem? So that's what we semi-automate today.
Amazing. So, why did you create Iris, and how could you talk us through a little bit about the process of that creation?
Yeah, so we were attending Singularity University, the summer program at NASA Ames Research Park, and there they challenged the students to sit together, create small teams, and then come up with ideas that will positively impact the lives of 1 billion people within a decade. So that was our starting point. We sat down as a little team with, good complementary skills, and we're like, what problems we want to solve? Amazing. And then we walked through probably half of the world's problems and couldn't really find anything that kind of all stuck with us. And what we found was that no matter what problem we were discussing, we were like, surely someone must have done work on this before, right? What does research say? What do scientists say? If we talk about clean water, like someone must have, invented something or written a research paper on something, right? But it's hard to find for someone who's not a domain expert. So after going in that loop a few times, we're like, well, how about we just solve that problem? How many innovators and brilliant people with great ideas or big problems to solve could we enable if we could build a system to actually make sense of all of the research around a certain topic?
Amazing. So good. But I've actually used Iris before. And I was super duper impressed with the way that it kind of visually represented kind of like that network of information. And as a first point, very useful. It kind of does that literature review, which people usually spend weeks, months, sometimes years on, kind of like put it all into one very pretty document in the matter of minutes. And yeah, very, very impressed. Anita, how would you introduce AI to someone who says they have no knowledge about it at all?
So the easiest way I look at AI, and AI is a really big fluffy umbrella term, right, that covers a wide variety of topics. But the easiest way to look at it is that regular software works very much like a calculator. You input A plus B and you get C. And you know that you'll get C because you were the one that wrote, if you were the one writing the code, that's what you've told it to do, right? And you get the same result every time. With AI, it works more like the human brain, and I say like, not exactly as, because we don't even quite know how the human brain works. So we just, model it the way we think the human brain might work. And basically, if you give it A plus B, it might give you C the first time, but then what answer you get will depend on what data you have fed into the system. So over time, as the machine learns, you might get C, or you might get C plus 1, or you might get, an elephant. I don't know. Depends on what data the machine has seen.
Amazing. So I guess following on from that, it seems that AI, can be very smart and can learn from time. In what ways does AI differ from human intelligence?
So, well, that kind of ties me back to the previous answer as well, right? Which is like, we don't really know how human intelligence fully works. I mean, I think it's really important to understand with AI that when we talk about AI applications today, we're talking about narrow AI. And that means AI that can do one thing only. Like if you call your insurance company and there's a bot on the other end that is like somewhat smart in understanding what you say, yes, it falls under the category of AI technologically, but it's a narrow AI, right? It does one thing, it does that one thing well. And that's the state of AI today. Like we are still far in kind of our lifetime, or in our, you know, as a 30-year-old, we're still far from you know, the augmented the artificial general intelligence, right? So we're talking narrow AI. So in that sense, AI today is very, very, very different from human intelligence. It can read massive numbers, massive image sets, do pattern recognition, and it does that much better than a human brain. So I don't really see, and it will be interesting to see kind of when we get closer to AGI, or general intelligence, how that will play out compared to human intelligence. And I think we're going to see that in many ways it's very different and very complementary, right? One of the good things about narrow AI is that you can kind of just boost up your computational power, and you can look at data sets that is vast compared to what you can do as a human. So it's very different in that sense. There are people who think that, you know, AI can never be creative like human. Like you can discuss whether human intelligence includes creativity, but you know, I think that's a human trait. Let's put it like that. And then there's a lot of people who say, well, AI can never be creative. But then when you break down creativity, like I have a creative background. I have a bachelor's degree in theater, and that's where I started. And, you know, one of the things my theater teacher always said is creativity in art is really just about taking everything you've seen before and repackaging it and making it your own. And I think AI can do that. And we've already seen kind of the deep image nets and things like that, examples of like the AI's dreaming and things like that, which is pretty disturbing, fairly creative, but all kind of straightforward algorithm based. So it's a really interesting debate, and I don't quite know, but I think we're going to see that like artificial intelligence and human intelligence will be very complementary.
Amazing. So I think following on from that, I think Iris on the website has a few different case studies of how Iris has been used to improve you know, the way that people have approached big research problems and world problems. Could you share with us one of your favorites?
Right. I think my favorite one is still probably one of the first ones we did, which was the big question was, how can you build a reusable rocket out of composite materials? Right, and we helped the company kind of kickstart that process. And the reason why I like that problem so much is, first of all, it's fairly geeky. It's very SpaceX, and it's just a really cool example of like a truly interdisciplinary problem. Right, you have a very clear goal, like build a rocket. It should be of composite materials and it should go to space. Like it's a fairly like, this is a very clear goal, but like we have no idea how to get there. Right. Is the technology there? Are the materials there? And it brings together material science, you know, sensoring techniques, manufacturing processes, you know, rocket science, obviously, space, and you know, astrophysics, and you know, suddenly you have to like have a team that sits and bring together all of this research, and that was really cool to see. And the teams competing in this challenge, because it was kind of a one-day challenge just to kickstart this and see what we would find. And the teams participating weren't, I mean, they were super smart and had, you know, masters and PhDs, but they weren't deep domain experts. And they were able to you know, to discover quite a few really interesting papers that would kind of together, you know, show that there is a direction here. The problem isn't fully solved yet, but like it was, you know, within just a few hours, we suddenly had like this tentative outline of like, you know, here's something that could work. So that was really interesting to see.
So good. Just before, you mentioned that you actually have a creative background. So at FYA, we're really interested in how, you know, in the future of work and what young people and the skills that we need to equip us for the future of work. So you would have probably what many people would consider quite an unconventional career. Could you give us a little rundown of some of the things you have done to get you where you are today?
Right. So I was going to study medicine because where I grew up, like everyone that got good grades were going to study medicine or become a lawyer. Like that was it. There was no, that was the career path. But I've been doing theater for a bit, and I was like, you know what? I feel like I just need to get theater out of my blood for a year, and then I'm going to go study like 7.5 years of medicine. Just wasn't quite ready. So I jumped into theater school, really loved it. It was very practical, very like hands-on, always on stage, always like telling stories and doing, acting with masks and all of this kind of crazy stuff. So I ended up doing a bachelor's degree in that. As part of that, like there are no jobs in theater. So we started our own company a year into it, just because there are no jobs. We make our own. We started some classes, some performances, started doing events or like body language, presentation technique classes, team building events for companies. I just really enjoyed the process of running this company, but it annoyed me that it wasn't scalable. It was just me and my friend as the consultants, and it wasn't scalable. So we could like reach enough people. And then actually the financial crisis, 2008 happened. No company had money for theater anymore. So our budgets shouldn't, like our order book was just empty. And then I went to the summer program that took me randomly to Silicon Valley. And I kind of dove headfirst into the tech industry. Got a startup with the only startup I could understand remotely what was doing, because they had the word communication in their pitch. I'm like, oh, I know what communication is. I can totally do this. And I started there, and then I got them to hire me like halfway through the summer, and I stayed there for 2 years, working with them, doing customer relations management. I was the only one left in the company when it crashed and burned, so I learned a lot from that process. After the CEO quit on the spot, and it was a mess and quite an interesting learning experience. And then after that, I did my master's eventually in entrepreneurship and business design. While I studied for that, what I really did was a solar light entrepreneurship project in Kenya. I also built a race car. Then I started a company doing heat exchanger network optimization, then another one doing automated matchmaking between students and internships. I wanted to get more, and that kind of almost loops back to the question of career paths, right? Yeah. Like, how can we get people like more practical experience? Like what you learn in like our schools are designed, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but our schools are designed to like fit you into this box, right? And like if you're an accountant, here's the accountant box, and you fit into that one. Here's what you learn, right? And so much education is like that. So we're like, can we get people like more hands-on experience? There's all of these companies who, on occasion have this like, oh, I have this like 2-week project, 4-week project that starts like yesterday. I should just have someone and go with it. Why not bring in a bunch of students, and we're not the only ones who think this either. So, and it's definitely not that much of a novel idea, but I did that for a couple of years, then I applied to Singularity, and then I started Iris. So it's been an interesting path.
So good. Along that amazing journey, what do you think, could you name like a skill or two that you think really equipped you well to, follow that line into, from theatre student to building race cars and to creating Iris?
Right. So I think, and I don't quite know how to formulate this, but like, I think I have this like annoying tendency to say yes before I fully understand what the implications are. Which sometimes, and I do need to be mindful about it, because I also want to, I know that there, especially kind of in the entrepreneurial world, there is a tendency of people to burning out and kind of overextending themselves. So I do try to be mindful, and I do kind of, I do meditation and things like that to kind of try to stay centered in the now and not stress out about everything. But so I do try to practice self-care in that, but I also have this tendency to just like, I remember the race car thing, right, which ended up being a year of my life of really intense work in the student engineering competition. And we actually won, which was super cool. And it was the first Nordic team to ever win this. But it was one of those things, like I got a random email of one afternoon that said like, it was crappily formulated. And it was like, but it was like something, do you want to build a race car? And I'm like, yes, of course I want to build a race car. And I like went for this interview. Right, exactly. And I'm like, I went for this interview, literally like they were supposed to interview me for like joining the team. And I was just there like, hey, I have no idea what this project is about, but it sounded cool. So like, could you tell me some more? And then, so I kind of like stumble into those kind of random things just because like, ooh, that sounds fun.
Just make the most of all the opportunities that come past.
Exactly. And that's brought me into a lot of weird situations for sure. But like, I think that's that's the one trait that I'm really kind of grateful I'm seem to be born with or have picked up along the way. I don't quite know, but yeah, that gets me into a lot of fun projects.
Yeah, you could almost say that, that theatre training kind of like trained you to be, adaptable and move through all of these different careers, jobs, kind of thing. With
I had. That's true, and I actually had a really interesting. When I was in this entrepreneurship program, towards the end of the second year, as we were finalizing our master's thesis, a lot of my classmates were obsessing about like these trainee programs for like the McKinsey trainee program and the whatever. Everyone was obsessing about it, and I hadn't even given it half a thought whether that was something I wanted to do. I'm like, McKinsey is my plan D. No offense to McKinsey, but like that's just everyone there was obsessed with McKinsey, and we had this career coach as part of our track, and I spoke to her and I'm like, should I be doing that? Like, is there something I missed on the way? Like, is that a thing that people do? And like, and she's like, well, don't, a lot of people consider and we talk about the career ladder, right? You start from here and then you work your way up. And that's a really outdated concept, right? And what she said that really helped me was, don't look at your career as this ladder to be climbed. Just your career is the sum of everything you've done up until now. That's it. And for me, that changed the way I looked at it. I'm like, I'm doing my thing. And like all of this weirdness will someday, not that I'm ever going to apply for a job, I think, but you never know. Maybe.
So given that, we don't really, your career isn't necessarily this ladder that you have to climb. So bring it back to AI, I guess. What do you think the future of work will look like with the integration of AI? Do you think we're going to be replaced by robots?
Well, then we first have to define what a job is, right?
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of elements to work. I think there's let's take the obvious one first, which is, money and survival. And I think that's like the economic models of the 21st century is something we, really have to look at and see, like, are we, anyway, that's a whole other discussion. So, and there's what's interesting right now, and I'll just mention this and we won't necessarily go into detail, but what's really interesting are the number of people looking into governance, as in, reinventing democracy through the application of blockchain right now. Like the number of people that are like sitting, literally like racking their brains going like, well, proxy, where you just like elect a government and half the country disagrees, obviously doesn't work. I mean, look at the US, right?
Yeah.
Direct democracy obviously doesn't work because you need a well-educated, knowledgeable, body of people that vote that actually understand the implications of the, so that doesn't work. Like mathematically, how can we make this work? Like, and with the blockchain and all of the projects spinning out of that, you have so many opportunities to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail. So I think we're going to see some really, so tangent, but like the economic models we live in has to change somehow, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of them. But the other aspect, which I kind of obsess about, is that we look at work as this like ultimate life experience. I really don't think like a 9-to-5 job is like the ultimate human experience, right? We're here on Earth for what is, at least for now, a very limited, number of years. Like, why do we obsess about this? What do you do? What's your work? That is like our key identifying factor.
It's one of the first things we say to each other when we get to know each other. Right. What do you do for work?
Exactly. And it's like the ultimate icebreaker, and we chat about it. And I think that's problematic, and I would rather hear about like, what are you passionate about? And sometimes that's people's work and sometimes it's not, and that's fine, and I have plenty of friends that have like, run of the mill 9-to-5, 9-to-4 jobs where they don't, they have nice people that they hang out with at work, but it's really not more than that, right? I mean, statistics, depending on countries, like 63% to like 70% of people are just not really engaged with their jobs, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to kind of redefine what it means to work, right?
Yeah.
But what is embedded in that? Obviously, we need meaning in our lives, but work doesn't actually provide us meaning as opposed to what we seem to think and believe. So that's my answer.
Great. That kind of ties into one of the questions that we got in our live stream today, in this like redefining what work might be. So with the Industrial Revolution, we saw a significant shift from labor workers to knowledge workers. So what kind of workforce shift might we see with the advancements of AI, and where would you like it to go?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's this notion, and some people, and we spoke about this earlier as well, right? With the whole creativity and kind of, personal expression of creativity. And I think that's in some ways true, because a lot of the knowledge work will be done by machines simply because our human brains just aren't capable of processing all of the knowledge, right? So we need machines, and that's kind of the space I'm working in. Like, we have 150 million research papers and counting or so, right? It's not humanly possible to read it all. So the knowledge worker will definitely be aided, if nothing else, by machines. I think there's a couple of aspects. There's a creativity, but I think it's dangerous to label it as creativity, because a lot of humans don't feel creative. Like, that's seen as something, coming from a theater background, like people who don't feel creative, or like, oh, that you're all kind of expressive and like, I'm not like that. And I'm like, it's not about like drawing nicely, which I cannot do whatsoever, or like performing on a stage, but I think it's about like expressing our humanity in a way. And I think the human element, as hard as that is to put into words, and I'm gonna use the word, and I'm gonna use it cautiously because I think it can put off a lot of people, but the spiritual element, what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And I'm currently right now listening to the audiobook of Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now, right? And like, we have since the Industrial Revolution and beyond, we've been in this like state of like in our heads and in our like, do this, go to work, fix this, da 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 da. We live this like treadmill life where like we never seem to get anywhere, right? And I hope that we'll see kind of a more conscious shift towards like being present, enjoying ourselves. Maybe the old kind of hunter-gatherer societies weren't too bad, and like, well, I'm going to spend a little bit of time like doing the hunting and gathering, like one estimate is like 6 weeks per year, and then then just like hang out with friends, tell stories, sit by the bonfire or the solar panel, whatever it is today. Just enjoy ourselves, like have sex, chat with our friends, spend time with our family, whatever, or be creative in terms of like art or whatever. I think humans have this like adventure, some humans have a need for adventure and want to kind of go out there and see the world or see space or see, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Some people want to be more introspective and look within and have that kind of experience. I think we all kind of hunger for experience, and some people really just want to sit at home in front of the fireplace and read a really good book for a long time. And if we can get more time for that, and that doesn't just include the Western world, and I think it's important to mention that I think this is, we obviously have a big inequality problem in the world as well, and that's kind of sometimes the elephant in the room when we discuss these things, that there's a lot of people who, spending time learning to play the guitar is just like so far from their world, because really all they need to do is survive. So there's obviously an inequality that needs to be highlighted in that context as well.
Great. I need to start wrapping up. So given, all of these amazing opportunities that you had, you mentioned that going to Singularity was, kind of a big flashpoint in, this wonderful journey of narrative of this career that you've had. Could you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like at Singularity University and why you would recommend it for other people?
Right. It was, and it's still hard to explain what happened because it was a 10-week program. I still have this very distinct feeling of Inception, if you remember the movie, where like you kind of come in on one side and you go out on the other side, and you're both like, holy shit, what just happened? Because it felt like 3 seconds, but yet I had lived this like lifetime and was entirely changed on the other side. There's a couple of things for me that they kind of changed everything. One was like my perspective on obviously like the exponential change of technology and the future that is really coming. And also the kind of humanities aspect of it, like the big problems we have and how they could be solved, or we could be really close to a dystopian future as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be utopia. And I think as far as the marketing material Singularity, sometimes it's very like we're building a utopian world, but when you're actually digging down into the subjects, you always get the pros and the cons, the utopian scenarios, the dystopian scenarios. And I personally think we're going to end up somewhere in the middle because things are never, either way. So anyways, there's that part, all tech, understanding biotech and where we are with digital biology and AI and blockchain and all that. On the other hand, like being equipped with this like feeling that, you know what, I can actually go out and change the world. And like actually honestly believe it. And it might be this startup, it might be another way, like I don't know, but like I do have that power and that, both privileged position in life and having had the opportunity and having a solid network, etc. But also just like I can probably do it, like I can pull it off, and having that empowerment has been really vital. So that's what it did for me. I know some of my classmates had very different experiences. Some felt like most of the tech they already knew about. It's not, everything you learn there really is stuff you can learn online. It's not like there's some magical content that only you will learn by being at Singularity. It's obviously not accessible to everyone. They take in a limited number of students, etc. But the transformativeness is like being in that bubble of like, my classmates were some of the smartest people I've ever known, and like with their hearts in the right place, and like have done some amazing things, right? And when you sit like night after night after night up to like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. and like discuss like the meaning of life and what does consciousness really mean, and how will AI, the future of jobs, all of that. You sit night after night after night, for 10 weeks with 80 of these people, at some point your perspectives changed, and that's kind of the experience that I got out of SQ. While the content, again, can be read online or can be looked at anywhere.
So good. Well, thank you so much for giving us the time and speaking to us tonight. So for all of you watching at home, Anita will be here in Australia at the Singularity Summit, which is from the 19th to the 21st of February. So like I said, the link is in the description. If you want to check out more about Anita, please come and attend. Otherwise, if you want to check out more about FYA, you can find that in the description as well. So thank you, Anita, so much for your time.